the Lord shows us by being merciful as He is merciful. I don't know how many of us have gone through high school literature in English and had to go through Shakespeare's play, The Merchant of Venice. And as one Jewish psychiatrist points out in his book, the idea of God's mercy appears in practically every one of Shakespeare's plays. Some 90 times or something like that. But the greatest one is Portia's speech, "The quality of mercy is now strained. It falls as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesses him who gives and him who takes," etc. Then he says, the greatness of kings is when they are merciful as God is merciful. Where they could condemn, but instead they pardon and forgive. And so the Lord, in these last times, because the end times are from Pentecost until the Lord returns, He presents to us the program of mercy. And this is the church's main occupation: to spread God's mercy, which is the same as grace, which means a freely given gift. And through His church, through His body, this mercy is to shine on the world and attract all those who don't know Him, or those who denied Him, or those who separated from Him. And so He gives us means of doing this. And to Sister Faustina, He said, the perfection of mercy for us humans is deeds of mercy, words of mercy, and prayer. And he said, you can't always do deeds of mercy, and you can't always give the word of mercy, which is compassion shown by speaking to others, lifting them up, and consoling and comforting, etc. But he says you can always pray. And what is prayer? It is conversation with God that gives Him permission then to act in our situations. All of us have a particular network of connections. God places in something that nobody else has those kind of relationships as we have. Sometimes they intermingle, but each one of us has a sphere of relationships. And so in a sense, God gives every one of us that task of drawing those who are influenced by our relationship to Him. And that is done through mercy. And one way is through prayer. Now, how many there are who are skeptics, or they don't believe that prayer means anything? And yet, it does. The way that Jesus, as the God-man, got the courage to go on through His passion was He prayed with sighs and groanings, so that the Holy Spirit then could open up in Him that tremendous flame of love to go through what needed to go through in order that our human nature could be transformed. In what way transformed? We have this beautiful analogy, inadequate, but I think pretty powerful, in the analogy of a piece of coal and a diamond. Coal and diamonds have something in common, something to do with carbon. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know the exact element there, but I know it's got something to do with that element called carbon. What do we have in common with God? A spark of His very life. But we are creatures. He is eternal. We have at one time not been. And besides, the spark of His life is connected with our physical nature. So we are like the piece of coal. But God intended us to become diamonds. So even though we're created as human beings, he wants us to be divine as he is. How does a piece of coal become a diamond? And it's possible for it to do that. It has to go through intense heat and pressure. What is intense heat and pressure for us human beings? Suffering. And our whole life is a whole string of suffering. And therefore, where before the coming of Christ, suffering was the thing to be avoided, and those who are, in a sense, without Christ today, why are the pharmaceuticals so rich? Everybody's trying to get away from suffering, reduce it, not believe it. But the thing is, as most doctors will tell us, suffering is an indication that something is not in order and it has to be rectified. So just taking an aspirin or any other painkiller isn't going to get rid of the source of the pain. And it is the source of the pain that needs to get rid of if we really want to be in the state of health and happiness. So the Lord shows us, however, that pain is not all that bad. We need that heat and that pressure in order to be transformed. That heat and pressure for Jesus as the God-man was precisely his sufferings. And I think in this light we can see that whole movie of Mel Gibson's on the Passion, that here what Jesus went through in those 12 hours was the crowning point of that was needed to transform the human heart into a divine heart. Remember the Ezekiel and Jeremiah says, I will take their stony hearts and place in them a heart of flesh and pour my spirit into them. And this is the work of suffering, so that for Christians now and anyone who accepts Christ, suffering is not a stumbling block. It is the necessary process in order for us to reach that union with God, which union requires that there be no trace, no shadow of selfishness, but that we be totally outgoing, which is the essence of love that is God's essence.